But we've got to take that action, take that emotion and turn it into action. Because right now, we stand at a critical juncture. We stand together on the front lines of one of the greatest fights that we will ever have.
So shame on you. What we do with our bodies.
But for most of our history, take all the way up to the Civil War, the Supreme Court, for example, never did anything for enslaved Americans other than to cement and constitutionalize the system of slavery in the Dred Scott decision and to declare that African Americans have no rights that the white man is bound to respect, and to declare that the Constitution is indeed a white man's compact. And then even after the Civil War and the Reconstruction Amendments, the court articulated American apartheid in Plessy versus Ferguson, approving Jim Crow arrangements throughout most of the country. So there was that brief few decade period with the Warren Court, but then with the Burger Court, the Rehnquist Court, and now the Roberts Court, the Supreme Court has returned to that traditional baseline. And all it means to me, at least in my mind, and admittedly I'm speaking as a person in politics, but we need to turn out the vote like we've never turned out the vote before. The people need to stand up and defend democratic institutions and the rights of the people, because the Supreme Court is certainly not doing anything for us.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, May 4th. 2022, and demonstrations, as you have seen, have gotten louder outside of the Supreme Court. Excuse me, with the nation exploding over what the Supreme Court has confirmed as an authentic draft notice that revealed that the justice of the U.S. Supreme Court will indeed overturn the 1973 Roe v. Wade abortion law. The ramifications are far more reaching than just abortion rights and the rights to choose when you dissect the court's opinion. How about this, which is extremely important? Justice Alito's draft opinion for the court says that Roe was egregiously wrong because it protects a right that was not included in the text of the Constitution, was not protected by the original meaning of the Constitution, and was not traditionally safeguarded as a constitutional right. But by that reasoning, countless other Supreme Court decisions protecting basic aspects of privacy and autonomy were wrongly decided as well. For example, it was not until 1965 in Griswold versus Connecticut that the court held that the Constitution protects a right to purchase and use contraceptives. It too is not a right in the text of the Constitution or contemplated when the document was ratified or that was historically protected. As someone wrote, we should expect that after Roe is all overruled, some states will quickly pass laws prohibiting types of contraceptives that act after conception, like the IUD and the morning after pill. Under Justice Alito's reasoning, those laws too would be constitutional. Or consider the right to marry. It wasn't until 1967 in Loving versus Virginia and in 2015 in Obergefell versus Hodges that the court protected a constitutional right to marry, striking down laws prohibiting interracial marriage in the former case and laws forbidding same-sex marriage in the latter. But this right cannot be found in the text, the original meaning or tradition. Likewise, the court has protected the right to procreate, the right to custody of one's children, the right to keep the family together, the right of parents to control the upbringing of their children, the right of competent adults to refuse medical care, and the right of consenting adults to engage in same-sex sexual activity under the liberty of the Due Process Clause. These rights, too, cannot be justified under the court's approach in Justice Alito's draft opinion. Simply put, the court's pulling out the thread of abortion rights threatens to unravel a fabric of rights that have been protected for decades. These are fundamental aspects of liberty that warrant constitutional protection. We discussed all of that this morning with Don Montgomery of the Atlanta Voice, attorney Robert Tarver of the Tarver Law Firm in New Jersey, and James Wright of the Washington Informer. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, I'll start. Ladies first. Dawn Montgomery of the Atlanta Voice. We are hearing so much stuff with the U.S. maternity mortality rate already reaching record highs, far surpassing all other developed nations. Let's talk about the repercussions that further restrictions will have on public health.
I mean, we as a Black woman, let me start there, dealing with Black maternal health rates, the right to choose, the autonomy that we must have for our own selves and our own bodies. I think it's going to be one of those things where we really have to show up and fight. I know that a lot of people are not, they've lost their belief in the government. I know that for my generation, some people didn't get out and vote back in 2016 when some of these things were being discussed and being said. And a lot of people didn't believe that this could possibly be happening right now. But as we can see, we see a confirmed, draft of an opinion from the Supreme Court, and now it's really real. So for a lot of people in general, all of our public health rights are about to be on the chopping block, and just any and everything that they could possibly take and overturn at this point. I think it's something where we have to take this very seriously and we have to really show up. And honestly, a lot of the conversations that I'm seeing via Twitter, social media, and things like that, because I'm very active there, I mean, we kind of want to see our allies step up. We want to see more white women speaking up about these things, because we feel as if, a lot of them kind of turned a blind eye or side, view to what's happening right now. So at this point, we've got to figure out how we can organize and strategize to kind of just be at the forefront of all of this, to kind of deal with this in the moment.
Yeah, and Attorney Tarver, what other rights, when you look at Justice Alito's opinion, it really is a telltale sign that other rights are now in jeopardy. I mean, civil rights, everything is in jeopardy now. And we lost your sound.
Oh, I'm sorry. First and foremost, let me commend you on your opening, because you clearly laid out all of the history and all of the case law that supports or has supported this right of privacy. When you look at this opinion, it is not only very direct, but it is hostile. The tone of this opinion is basically, I don't know why the Supreme Court has done what they've done in the past, but it is blatantly wrong. And that's deliberate. It's deliberate because the justices who have ruled or are going to rule in this, and I believe they are going to rule this way, are the justices who have been deliberately hostile to the right of abortion historically. And what it really comes down to is simply this. Many people want to focus on this opinion as being an abortion-related opinion, but it really is an attack on this broad spectrum of privacy rights. Yeah, the Constitution does not say that we have a right of privacy, but we all know that we do, and we do know that because we've allowed over historical terms for this right to be developed. What Mr. Alito and his progeny are saying is that, hey, wait a minute, this is not in the Constitution, so therefore you can't move forward with it. And the only way you can move forward with privacy rights are things that have historically been founded within the fabric of United States history and even European jurisprudence that shows that there's a historical basis for it. And they say abortion is not one of those things. But you know what? As you said before, there is no historical precedent for same-sex marriage. There's not one for contraception. There's not one for sodomy. And we know that sodomy laws just recently got overturned. So this is going to be a slippery slope. You can't start with this privacy thing and say, oh, we're going to stop at abortion. And quite frankly, I don't think it is the court's intention to stop at abortion.
Well, I'm going to stay with you for 1 second, Attorney Tarver, because I think it's important to hear from someone in the legal world on this, because Susan Collins, the representative from Maine, made the point yesterday of saying that two of the justices, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, essentially lied to her when they were being confirmed, flat out told her that they would not vote to take down Roe v. Wade. Now, we don't know which justices did, but obviously it's at least 5 of them, right? That voted, and you certainly going to put Gorsuch and Kavanaugh in there. But she said that she essentially said that they promised her. How serious? You've been a prosecutor, you're a defense attorney, you're an attorney, and you go before judges all the time. How serious is it for a judge to lie to a senator and a Supreme Court judge at that? And we're talking about 2 of them now, according to Susan Collins. They lied to her.
Well, let's be clear. They lied to the entire United States when they set forth a legal analysis during their confirmation hearings. It's completely inconsistent with what they're saying now, assuming that this opinion mirrors what they are going to actually rule. But, the question of how serious it is comes down to, what are the consequences? There are no consequences for these justices if they did lie to the senator. Look, could you move forward with impeachment? I guess there is some form of doing that. But do you think in anyone's universe that the conservative right, including Susan Collins, would move in any way that would jeopardize her seat? Absolutely not. We have seen some very egregious behavior on the part of our Supreme Court. Number one, the leaking of this opinion, which is absolutely unprecedented in our lifetime. Number two, the import and involvement of Ginny Thomas with Clarence Thomas and his refusal to recuse himself. And number three, right now, this whole idea that they have completely eviscerated privacy rights. No, there's nothing you can do with this Supreme Court. And I'm reminded, I don't want to take too much time here, but I'm reminded of this one moment in the Star Wars trilogy where the Emperor says, the domination is complete. What they did on the political side and now what they're doing on the legal side makes it very difficult for anyone to recover from this type of action.
Well, James Wright, we heard in the opening, and by the way, the Chief Justice Roberts did confirm that document is authentic. So that is the plan to overturn Roe v. Wade. He did confirm that. But we heard in the opening, and the video that, and I forget the gentleman's name who was saying it about voting and getting out the vote, and we keep hearing voting. But James, at what point do the politicians themselves take accountability? At what point? Because they're putting it all on the public. You got to do this. You got to vote. You got to. But they have the people who have made their choices, right? At what point do they take responsibility and act? It's more specifically the Democrats here.
This case is kind of special to me, Stacey, because as you know, I'm from Austin, Texas, and the lawyer who argued before the Supreme Court was Sarah Weddington. She was a state representative from Austin, and I remember her very well. And she died in December. But Sarah Weddington was considered a legend in Austin and a legend in women's legal circles. So this case is kind of special to me. I did not know her, but I knew a lot of people who knew Miss Weddington. Jeremy Raskin, Representative Raskin, is absolutely correct. It is important that the people turn out to vote in order to make sure that our privacy rights, as Attorney Tarver really laid out.
But James, let me respectfully interrupt. But I want to get to the heart of this because in 2020, they said that the people needed to turn out. Black women who this affects more than anyone. They turned out and turned people out in record numbers. They cast their ballots. They were the ones who made up this particular Congress, this Senate. Correct. And they put Biden and Harris in the White House. They did their job.
Correct. And let me tell you who's going to do their job in November. White women. This really hits white women. And let me tell you how. You're right about Black women being affected directly. But let me tell you where white women are really going to get upset. They're getting upset because it's an infringement on their right to do what they want to do. And even though Black women and brown women may suffer more, white women are going to really turn out. Remember in 1989, when Douglas Wilder was running for governor of Virginia, he was running against Marshall Coleman. It was the white women in the Northern Virginia who turned out for Doug Wilder because Marshall Coleman was going to curtail abortion rights in Virginia at that time. Trust me when I say this, this is igniting white women. And it's those suburban white women that are going to turn out with the black women and brown women in order to keep things straight in November.
Well, Dawn Montgomery, according to statistics, Black and Hispanic women get abortions at higher rates than their peers. Women of color also experience higher poverty rates and could have a harder time traveling out of state, which was what this is going to do, right? Traveling out of state for an abortion. This is an issue that directly affects a lot of Black women, particularly those who struggle to make ends meet.
Right. And he hit it on a nail, and I hope that he's correct as well, that these white women would come out and, vote so that they can have their rights taken care of too. But I really, really feel like, most of them would be okay, because most of them would have the funds to travel. Most of them would have the ability to move around and find ways to get their abortions that they need. But for women like myself, we would have to figure out how to make that happen. And you got to also think about the fact that when you talk about the right to your body, autonomy, and things like that, like for most Black women who are trying to have children or are in delivery to give birth to a child, there are some situations where an abortion may be needed because of the issues or something that they're dealing with in the midst of dealing with those issues. Are they going to be able to do those things? Probably not. So that means that's going to be more taxing on our bodies versus actually looking out for us overall. So then it comes back down to healthcare. We don't have universal healthcare in America. We don't have, the ability to have good insurance that would take care of and pay for the services that we really need. So when the Supreme Court says that they want this decision to really be in the hands of elected officials and, within the government, it's almost as if you're really not going to care whether we die or not, period. That's literally what the Supreme Court is literally putting out as a message right now.
Well, a couple of comments. David Youngblood says, I don't have the faith you have, James. Those same white women like their Wednesday hair appointments. And I believe he said the Thursday nail appointments. Is that what Thursday lunch dates? And Paris Brown says the ignorance of our white counterparts. Paris Brown of the Baltimore Times says the ignorance of our white counterparts amaze me. They continue to believe that certain issues are Black issues, but do not realize it's a health issue. Let's, Attorney Tarver, limits on abortion abortion access, I should say, can lead to negative long-term health effects. A major study from the University of California, San Francisco found that women are harmed by being denied abortions. The women surveyed who gave birth had economic hardship that lasted for several years. But here's the thing, Attorney Tarver, as you and I was just discussing, the infringement on other rights. The door is open. I have to go back to that. Yeah. Where are they going with this?
Here's the difficulty with this. Abortion has always been a very difficult topic for us to deal with in the Black community. Why? Because of the religious aspect. Now you have the co-option of a lot of the Black churches by the evangelical right, which puts them at odds in a number of ways of dealing with abortion. That's why I say, don't consider this case strictly in the abortion arena. You have to consider it for every other privacy right. The idea that you can marry who you would like to marry is not ensconced in the Constitution. It was also created out of this so-called penumbra of rights by the court. Now, these things can be thrown back to the states, and the states can decide, well, you know what? Forget Loving versus Virginia. We don't want interracial marriage here in the state of Virginia, or forget in New York your right to refuse medical treatment and things of that like. We don't want that here. And we're getting to be in the stage of states' rights again. And states' rights have never favored people of color. What you're actually setting up is you're setting up a a complete divisive United States. We will no longer be the United States of America. We will be a divided country where you will be able to move to the area which best suits you under law. And that's not what federal law was meant to cure. Federal law was meant to unify the country. You will no longer have that if you can't define what the particular privacy rights are. I do want to just go back to one thing. I don't have the faith in white women showing up this election. But number two, let's assume that we do show up for this election. Show up to do what? The burden toward moving to legislation that would ensconce or allow abortion is so incredibly high. Just think about that. The Senate is controlled disproportionately by red states. You're never going to be able to get the number of senators to overcome a filibuster, to overcome the number of processes. So it is a very, very difficult task. That's why this whole move by the Supreme Court is so insidious. And that's why what they did with regard to voting rights and what they did when they turned their back on Section 5 and Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was part of a deliberate plan to be able to lock everyone in to the whole idea of having to go along with this evisceration of privacy rights.
Well, David Youngblood, again, I agree with David Youngblood here. He says this is not about abortion. It's about relegation of others to second-class citizenship. And look, Dawn, James, Attorney Tarver, in 2016, Donald Trump, like every Republican presidential candidate dating back to Ronald Reagan, our resident historian here, James, can attest to that, campaigned on a promise to appoint pro-life judges to the Supreme Court. Despite serving only one term in office, Trump was able to deliver. He appointed Neil Gorsuch in 2017, Brett Kavanaugh in 2018, and then Amy Coney Barrett in 2020. And so when you talk about Dawn, voting, they made it clear. They have made it clear constantly that this is what they were after, and yet here we are.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you gotta believe someone the first. To me, I believe someone the first time, not wait for the second and the third time. It's believe them the first time, and he said it. And it was in one of those debates where he was debating against Hillary Clinton back then, and he laid out the plan, how he was going to appoint justices to overturn this. And this was going to be first, which means there's an agenda that they had for Trump to come in and do. And that man did his job. Yeah. You can't be mad at somebody showing up to work and doing their job. But the biggest thing with the Supreme Court is that we're mentioning is that some of these people lied. They lied early on to get appointed. They lied when they were in their confirmation hearings and all of this. And once they got in, that whole agenda came back to the forefront for them because they knew what they were being appointed for. So, and we just watched, our own Black justice have to go through this gruesome process. And you mean to tell me that when you jump up early to try to overturn or will overturn Roe v. Wade, it's literally one of those things where it's like, okay, what's next? We have to be more diligent about where we are, about what's really happening, and about the realization of like getting out to vote. Who's going to actually put forth an agenda for the Democrats so that the rest of us know what's going to happen? Because at this point, you've got a whole generation of voters that come under me, as well as new voters who are like, okay, well, Democrat or Republican, I really don't know which way to go. And now who's going to be there to represent the people and what they need?
And James, here's why you also have a problem. They took the most misogynistic, xenophobic president that there was, who told you what he was going to do. And not only did he tell you what he was going to do, he told you and suggested for the first time that any president has ever done that we would criminalize women for getting an abortion. Now, if that didn't galvanize and get women, white women, off of the fence, I'm not sure what would. So that's why I say it's very difficult to predict that white women will actually turn out in huge numbers.
They did in 2018. They did in 2018, which flipped the House from Republican to Democrat. and they did in 2018. Now, I'm not saying that I trust white women to do the right thing. And by the way, that stereotype about white women in these suburban areas getting nails and all that type, that's not true. The majority of white women are working. They're not rich at all. They don't have a lot of money. That's why they have to rely on other people. So let's just keep it at that.
Well, and they also voted in a man who said grab them by their private parts. Right?
Exactly. Come on, pink hats. Like they were out in droves with pink hats. But if we had to look at how many of them actually voted for that man, because another thing that we don't necessarily talk about in the Black community is with white women, and I know this personally because I've worked and I've organized and I've volunteered with white women before on the political front, and most of these women will come out. They will organize. They will strategize. But when they get in that booth, what did their husband say? What did their family say? Most of them won't stand up and make that decision. So at this point, if we had a call to action right now, we would want them to make the decision based on what they feel. And they know that their rights are being violated right now. They know that they don't necessarily have a voice anymore. Like, you're right there with the rest of us. So why not try to make it better for all of us and make yourself feel even better about the fact that you made a change with your vote?
You know, Cheryl Smith, the publisher of Texas Metro News, was with us this week. And she said something I thought was really interesting. I don't know that it got a lot of attention, but she said that when they call for these, and I think she was alluding to all of these different drives, the Coleman for the Cure and things like, she didn't name Coleman for the Cure, but things like that. She said she's not answering her phone unless, of course, they show some sort of solidarity with Black women and causes like this. Go ahead, Dawn. I was going to you with it anyway.
That's important, because I know my grandmother passed away with breast cancer years ago. And I was one of the first people to jump up and be like, yes, Susan G. Komen, all this, like, I'm supporting, I'm putting all my pink on. And then after a while, it hit me, when you attend these things, you don't see a whole lot of us. You don't see us being represented. You don't see our narratives, you don't hear our voices. And so I started asking, like, locally at the time, with different organizations, like, what are you doing for Black women? What are you thinking about with Latino women? What are you thinking about with Asian American women? And they were like, well, none of them really, come to us with their stories. Well, why don't you go find them? If you're not looking for us, if you're not paying attention to us, because we're right here, you can find us literally anywhere, honestly. You can stop a Black woman in the grocery store, and if she's comfortable enough, she would probably tell you, how this is going to affect her, Roe v. Wade being overturned. And it's just one of those things where if you're not being inclusive and thinking about how to make sure that everyone else is represented, then don't ask me for my dollars. Don't ask me, to show up. Don't ask me to use my platform to promote your agenda, because they have their own agenda as well.
Yeah, and given the fact too that we know all of the disparities in medical care and healthcare, and so what you're just saying, I think is pretty powerful. James, I want to go back to you real quick, because David Youngblood, who always gives us some food for thought, he says the con started the day after Johnson, my fellow Texan, signed the Civil Rights Act. Mr. Historian James, do you agree with David that this con began way back then?
Well, if he's talking about the Southern shift, in which a lot of white male Democrats and white female Democrats which switched to the Republican Party because they didn't want to be in a party where Black people had influence, he was absolutely correct. And President Johnson said that, and I'm paraphrasing him saying, I hope the Negro uses the vote in order to get what he wants. He's absolutely correct. I think that what we have to do, and we as Black people, we have to find our allies among white women and get them to and hold them accountable in terms of keeping the Democratic majorities in the House and in the Senate. We do need them, but we don't have to depend on them. So that's what I'm saying.
Well, let's run this down a little bit to the anti-abortion strategy of chipping away at Roe v. Wade has been very successful, right? Between 2011 and 2016, over 160 abortion providers closed or stopped offering terminations, the largest rate of closures since 1973. Multiple states, including Mississippi, have one remaining abortion clinic in operation. And we can go on and on. There's 23 states that have laws that will be in effect immediately when this when they do officially overturn Roe v. Wade. So this attack has been going on for decades, and now it's finally come, as Malcolm X said, the chickens have come home to roost, right?
Right.
Attorney Tarver.
Yeah. Here's the problem with all of this. The opinion is so radical, just wiping out any notion that there can be a right to abortion, that you have to think, how then do you get back from that except from a voting point of view? The court is lost to that, because unless you change the composition of the court, what they basically said is that doesn't exist. They defied history. They defied the very thing that they stood in front of the Congress and said that we will respect precedent, and that's a lie. We will respect precedent in this thing. So now the precedent right now is that there is no privacy right that's not specifically ensconced in history. And that puts us all at risk here in America, particularly people of color.
Well, we started by giving ladies first the first word. Let's give the ladies the last word. Dawn, where do we go from here?
Where do we go from here? I think Mr. Wright just put it in our private chat here. We have to try to figure out how to build coalitions to win in November. I also feel like I'm going to need more white women to be welcoming more Black and brown women to come in conversation with them about how to move forward. Don't make that decision for us. Listen to us, hear us out, stand next to us. An ally actually listens and acts with change behavior. Like, don't do the things you keep doing every November. Don't do the things that you keep doing in preparing for each election. So at this point, it's a matter of not necessarily more so taking to social to kind of down this, because honestly, as we have discussed on this show, it's more than likely going to happen. So if it's going to happen and you have all of these and, abortion rights advocates that have all been preparing since 2016 for this moment, then we have to act accordingly.
Well, this conversation obviously is just getting started. We certainly will continue to bring you up to the minute news and information and this type of dialogue on this and other vital issues that affect Black America right here at the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Dawn Montgomery. Thank you, Attorney Tarver. Y'all got to check Attorney Tarver out. I keep telling y'all, look him up. I'm sure he doesn't mind another client or two.
I got one quick shout out.
Yes. Shout out.
I want to say happy birthday to my mom. I know she's watching, she's listening, what have you. So happy birthday, Mom, in Forest, Mississippi. I love you.
Hey, James, any shout outs to your people, the co-owners at Denny's?
No, lower your prices.
Lower your prices. That's priceless. Thanks for watching. Let It Be Known. We'll see you tomorrow.